Wake up. You must review the new Wheel of Time episode.
I was studying. I was studying. I was definitely not napping. Wait, Moraine?
Yes, it is I.
Why do you sound so manly?
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Yeah, you do. Anyways, I got like a million things to do for finals week. I can't review this week's episode.
Just review the episode.
Okay, fine. Episode 5 of the Wheel of Time was by far my favorite episode so far. Everything that they did in this episode was excellent. There were some very bold choices to divert from the books, and I am still a bit worried about how those things will turn out, but so far the writers have proven that they can create their own storylines, so I'm excited and confident in them doing a good job. You guys should subscribe because 1, I want to hit 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and so far we're on track, and 2, I've got a lot of finals homework, and I'm deciding to do this instead of finishing my final projects. I'm sure my business law teacher would be happy.
It's Wheel of Time. Watch the Wheel of Time. Wheel of Time. It's Wheel of Time. Worry about those. Just watch the Wheel of Time.
But please subscribe, it'd help me out a lot, and it'd make it worth taking time away from studying finals. Anyways, on to the episode. We kick off with them burying the casualties of the battle with the Gelden army and Logan. And the Warder's pain in the scene is so palpable. You can see the distress. You can see that his life is essentially over with the death of his Aes Sedai. And Lan's just stoic, comforting hand on him meant more than any of the words any of the Aes Sedai could say on the grave. This is his brother in arms and one of the most respected men in all of the known world. It was great for Lan's character and also added even more depth to the bond that the Warder'S and Aes Sedai have. That's kind of the main theme of this episode, is that relationship and the grief that can be caused when losing somebody you love and treasure. This is the first episode without a cold opening, and I was getting a bit worried. I was like, wait a minute, they're serving these things out like Dairy Queen blizzards, and that makes it a bit less special when introducing new events in a cold opening. That's one of my favorite things, is after a while you fall into a pattern, and when they drop a cold opening, you're like, what the hell was that? Something that's a huge positive is these are hour-long episodes. They take their whole runtime. Some other shows will be like, oh, 8 episodes, and you assume it's an hour long, but it's like 45 minutes, maybe 50. They take their whole time. Full 60 minutes, baby, of Wheel of Time. We get the SpongeBob 1 month later title card as it skips to the Aes Sedai group and Nynaeve traveling to Tarvalin, and they are nearly there. They can see the city. And Logan is dead inside. It looks like he had the life ripped from him along with the source. I like the dead look in his eyes, and the character really embodied the power he had before and the confidence, and now he's just so dejected. It's a reflection of the Warder losing his Aes Sedai just as he loses the power. They are both so lost in the world right now. Ooh, I like that little parallel. They have wildly changed the progression of the story, but after thinking about it, it's not too wild. They essentially swap the cities and cut out some of the traveling stuff that a lot of people do not like in the Iowa world, but I thought really helped with showing how down on their luck these guys are at a certain period of time, especially Rand and Matt. But they essentially just skip forward, and Nynaeve and everybody else is at Tarvalin instead of Camelin. And I'm assuming that they're not going to introduce the one plotline that happens in Camelin while the boys are there. But so far, it's a pretty one-to-one transplant of the cities, besides a bit of the Aes Sedai stuff in the Warder. But where everybody is lines up pretty well and is an amalgamation of 2 different parts of the Eye of the World. It remains to be seen by the end of the season, but they are doing 8 episodes and they got Bezos money, so maybe it could have been 10 and you could have filled in this month, or maybe later on there's a need for another episode. But if you are already greenlighting season 3, you might as well make it as good as you can while you're at it. But that remains to be seen after the season ends to see if they rushed over or skipped anything that's essential and could have used an extra episode or 2 to flesh out. Rand and Matt are also traveling to Tarvalin, and in my notes while watching it, I put Matt down as a grungy asshole, which is pretty resplendent of his character at this point in time. And also, they're doing the book hints so well. That stone with the carvings in it, Yeah, remember that. I'm just gonna say, remember the stone. It is pretty important in the end. But as they approach Tar Valon, Mat is not in the best of moods, and Rand is really thinking about how the hell he's gonna keep Mat from getting murdered or stilled by the Aes Sedai. Another even better book hint is dropped as Rand stares at the volcano above Tar Valon, and it made me as a book fan just grin in anticipation as I saw that. Now, what is amazing so far is our first look at a big city. Tar Valon looks fucking lit. The cultural diversity and the sets within the city look so fine. I can't praise the looks of it enough. Ooh, I like the way that they are doing these large cities. If this continues with the cultural diversity in different lands across the Wheel of Time world, we're going to get a really distinct feeling for the series, and I'm looking forward to that. Now as Mat and Rand settle down into Inn, bemoaning the prices, we get another emotional scene. This is kind of the theme of the episode of everybody's depressed, everybody's sad, and everybody's contemplating their mistakes. And Mat thinks he's like, I murdered those kids, and he doesn't like believe Rand when he says the fate. And now I know some stuff from the books that will prove who actually did it, but it is ambiguous so far of who killed them. And despite Mat being extremely snappish and browbeaten, he is hurting himself over what he did to those people. He sees his own family in those corpses, and it is tearing him apart from the inside, along with that other thing that is making him act the way he is. While they're talking about the family, Rand mentions Tom like he's still living, and Mat is like, he's dead. Tom is gone. And this just makes me sad we did not get more scene of Tom and the boys. In the books, he teaches them gleeman skills so they can pay their way along wherever they go. They learn how to juggle, they learn how to sing, how to play the flute. The flute even becomes a prized possession of Rand's for a little while, and I just wish there was more time with Tom. That is something now that part of the story has ended. I think that they rushed a bit too much. At first I was like, yes, I like his introduction. The beginning of Eye of the World is packed with too many characters, but then they exited him too early and did not give us the emotional resonance we needed with Tom. That is something that I will criticize. Now in the White Tower, Nynaeve is questioning Moiraine, like, you said my friends would be here. And Moiraine is like, I'm using all my resources to find out exactly when they enter. And Nynaeve's like, but will you tell me when they enter? And finally Moiraine is like, yes, I will tell you when your friends are in Tar Valon. But she didn't say how early or late she will tell him. So you'd be like, I will tell you eventually, just not until it's convenient for me. So she is yet again playing with the words, even past the second level where Nynaeve recognized it. I like the depth of that, to where Nynaeve's like, I know you're bullshitting, and then she just bullshitted harder. That is the Aes Sedai way. Nynaeve is also acting brash and angry because she is scared of the source, as Moiraine says. You are so small, despite being extremely powerful, compared to the main part of the women's source. No way she holds a candle to it. And when Lan left, I thought Moiraine was just gonna like beat her ass with the power, because she was like, maybe the White Tower should be scared of me. And it's like, nah, not yet anyways. No, you are nothing at this point, really. You have no control, you have no skills, we'd whoop your ass. Now over with the Tinkers, I'm really glad to see Perrin and Aram being friends. I like that better than the book dynamic where Perrin's like super suspicious of him and him like hitting on Egwene. Like, I think it's very much more realistic that they become boys and they're like hanging out, they're chatting shit. But Perrin makes the worst straw man argument ever. Your dogs eat and commit violence, so why don't you? And it's like, come on, dude. You're smart, but it takes you a while, so you should probably think your thoughts through and not get into too many debates. But the White Cloaks appear, and we have Eomond Valden being the biggest piece of shit so far. Like, Liandrin has gotten more attention at being evil, but Valda in his scenes is just so vicious. She can't hold a candle to this man's cruelty. And so when they spot Perrin and Egwene, and they're like, oh, get the fuck out of our ways, and they link arms, it could have been really cringy, but the way that they just started beating the shit out of them, yeah, they won't kill them because they technically haven't done anything wrong, and they're not dark friends, even though if it comes to that point, they will accuse them, and they just start slapping the shit out of them. That worked well and was not cringy, but they eventually catch up. If they didn't catch up and they got away and this human wall actually worked, that would have been stupid, but they played this right to where it works and shows the culture of the Tinkers while also showing the cruelty of the White Cloaks, and in the end resulting in a realistic situation and a different version of what happens in the books. Back in Tar Valon, Rand is in the library trying to find a nice book to ponder over whether bringing Mat to the Rainbow Girl Scouts is the right idea, and that's when he runs into what he thinks is a Trolloc, but is my boy Loyal. Now the actor, he embodies this perfectly. The makeup, the hair, it's not as bad as I thought from that one screenshot release, but it's not great. I think it's passable, but they could change it up a bit. The biggest thing for me is the height. Yeah, it is unrealistic to add that more CGI, and it's easier to just have him be like 7-foot-ish with these thick boots, but Loyal is bigger than that, and they did a bit of a good job with the angles, but not as much as I'd like. They should have used the angles that they used for Perrin in a later scene for Loyal to make him seem that bigger force, but the costuming is just passable. Not great, definitely not good, but passable enough that if they didn't change it, it's whatever. It's not that horrendous. Loyal also mistakes Rand for an Eomond. Now, we saw the corpse of one back in the town where we met Tom. Rand corrects him and says, no, I was born and raised in the Two Rivers. I'm actually here with my friend, and I'm looking for some people that I lost. And Loyal just demonstrates his knowledge of the world, talking about hair colors and how they're a great way to identify where somebody's from. Loyal is the biggest nerd in the series of all things. Hey, maybe he's a fan of the channel. But anyway, they hear the procession of Logan coming along, and this is where we get a glimpse of Pat and Fane. That creepy little smile down on the street. He's like, yeah, I got some shit up my sleeve. And moving on, Rand finds Mat. Mat is just on the balcony, and Logan comes along and he spots the boys and starts cackling. Now, this moment they've changed decently, and I think they're leaning a bit too far into the mixing up the dragon thing. I think that this moment should have been reserved for one singular character, and it's being kind of diluted, and I don't really like that because the way it hits in the books, you kind of feel a cold stab of fear in your heart as you read this. I always imagine it as like just an ice cold look staring straight in their eyes, because Logan is talked about as being proud. He sits there as he's pelted with garbage, and he just stands there like a king. And Rand in the books is like, holy crap, he's thinking like, this man acts like the dragon. But anyways, that's just a smaller nitpick that I would have liked that character moment for that certain person. After this scene, we get a little look into the Warder'S talking. This just demonstrates more grief and the pain that Stepan is feeling over the loss of his Aes Sedai. When Lan talks and is like, hey, maybe you should bond somebody else, he snaps at him. He's like, lose Moraine, then talk to me about it. He is just in so much pain and dejection over having nothing to live for, as we see later. But then we move on to the White Cloaks scrubbing down Egwene in the most aggressive and abrasive way. This demonstrates the way that they think they cleanse the light and they cleanse the darkness from the world. They do it with force and cruelty, where a softer touch could work just as well and leave people unharmed. This is just a metaphor for the way that the White Cloaks function, but they end up having dinner with Eomond Valida, where my boy's getting in his protein. I see him. He's putting the gains. He's got the cutoff. I respect it. You may be an absolute Nazi of the series, but you're getting you lifted. I respect it, Eomond. Egwene is then tied down to a chair, and Perrin is put on this weird sex contraption that I'm sure they get kinky with when they're bored in the camps. But that's when he starts questioning them. He's like, hey, are you an Aes Sedai? I don't think so. But are you? Now, this is a bit of a contradiction with a previous scene where he questioned Moraine, and he used very indirect questions, because the White Cloaks are not supposed to believe in the three oaths. They think that they lie about telling the truth. And so in my mind, at first I was like, wait a minute, but then the later scene where he talks about breaking his code and doing what he wants instead of what they think is right by the White Cloaks laws, I think he knows Egwene is not an Aes Sedai at this point, and he's doing it purely out of cruelty. So he's ignoring the belief that the three oaths don't exist purely for the pleasure of torturing her and Perrin. This is my theory, and not that he actually believes in the three oaths, as was demonstrated when he talked to Moraine. Eomond starts torturing Perrin by cutting lines down his back, just bleeding as he's tied there, and Perrin's eyes flash gold. Wolf gold. Now, he is not tortured this way in the books, but I think an instigator for the change in the eyes is a good thing, because the way it happens in the books is fine, but I think this extreme moment makes it a bit more impactful the way that his eyes change. But Egwene has a feisty moment, and I just got flashbacks or flash forwards to the late books and the way that she acts and the way she holds herself. I have full confidence in this actor in a couple years to portray that and some of my favorite moments in the whole series perfectly. But Perrin is just being ravenously tortured by Eomond, while Egwene just sits there and like, please stop it. This scene was fucking awesome. This scene was just perfect and embodies the darkness and cruelty in the world of the Wheel of Time. It's not a happy-go-lucky story. And there's also some exposition about the hands and the way that Aes Sedai channel, and that it's not actually necessary as he has learned, but they do it as a crutch. Now this doesn't explain this shit from the last episode, but it does give a reason why they may make hand gestures instead of just standing there and weaving. I like the world building, and this is a great way to add it in by a guy who kills Aes Sedai. He should be the foremost one besides the Aes Sedai in how they fight and conduct combat. Next up, we have Nynaeve giving Stepin some herbs to sleep. They talk about the pain and how the pain reminds him, and it's the last thing he has left of her. And the hint set up to what he does later, I didn't really catch at first until I thought it over in my mind. I was like, wait a minute, he didn't lie to Nynaeve. And I love Nynaeve using the wisdom's craft, using the herbs to alleviate people's ills. She does this far into the series. She does not relinquish her roots to Emond's Field. Nynaeve then starts wandering through Tar Valon and runs into Liandrin, or Liandrin runs into her, and Liandrin is scheming. I had PTSD to the Cersei Lannister smirk by Liandrin, and I've got to give the actor praise. Now, I have been critical of the way that they've handled the Red Sisters as portraying them as villains too early on for my taste, but the actors themselves are doing a good job, and I think Liandrin is embodying the role that she is given. I just think it would have served a better purpose later on in the series. But she is scheming and tells Nynaeve, hey, why don't you go explore, as we see later comes up to her trying to undermine Moraine's power over these kids and try to recruit her into the Red Aja. Now, something I forgot to touch on when talking about Mat and Rand earlier, they talked about if either of them could channel, they do what a friend would do. They make sure they don't turn into that, pointing at Logan. And I like this. I like the way that they're characterizing these guys as boys. They will do whatever for each other. They displayed it in the last episode. They're continuing to display it. This makes it feel palpable, it makes it feel real, and it makes them feel like brothers. That's when Loyal barges in and he's like, look, I found the Two Rivers girl you were talking about. Check out the braid. And this demonstrates more his knowledge of the world. The inferences he took from his conversation with Rand extrapolate here. It may seem like a coincidence to people that don't really know the depth of the lore that he just managed to run into Nynaeve, but he connected these two things together. And those are the little subtle things that people will catch in repeat viewings of the series or while reading the books. I think that they're doing a really good job of making the show more than a surface level production. But Nynaeve goes to Mat, and Mat snaps at her, and then he's like, sorry, I did not mean to do that. And she's just like, sleep, I can't do anything for you right now. And that's when Rand and Nynaeve talk. Their friendships, although brief in the books until the later installments, are some of my favorite moments as their respect for each other grows. In the books, as Rand progresses, many people's view of him changes, but Nynaeve always keeps in mind his core person, and their friendship is one of the strongest dynamics in the whole entire series. But they essentially echo chamber back and forth about their worries about the Aes Sedai and bringing Mat to them, thinking he is a channeler. And Nynaeve's like, yeah, maybe we hold off on that just for a bit. In relation to the scene where Egwene had her feisty retort at Eomond Valda, Rand is worrying about her, as he mentioned to Loyal. Nynaeve reassures him, telling him about the Breakbone story and how she is unbreakable as a person. One of my favorite dynamics of Egwene throughout the whole entire series is the way she never gives up, never backs down. Egwene is one of the strongest characters simply because the force of will she has. And this episode starts establishing that as we get more time to really dive into these characters. And I love that they're putting this in even earlier. It doesn't establish till later in the books, but as they've done in the show, they're establishing character traits in different ways in an earlier setup. Back in the White Cloak camp, Perrin confesses to Egwene about killing Layla. At first, Egwene misinterprets him, and he's like, no, I killed her. And Egwene doesn't try to immediately reassure him that it isn't his fault. She is shocked too, but eventually she's like, Perrin, there's nothing you can do about that. And in this moment, I got a little teared up, and not for the last time this episode. Now, this is super surprising because I don't really have a total connection to Layla in any ways, as she's not in the books. But the writing and acting in this moment really exploited the connection I have to Perrin and the grief he feels in this moment. I can't give enough props to the actor. In this weird-ass contraption, giving a performance like that Fucking great job. But Eomond Valdo returns in due time and continues to make a chessboard out of Perrin's back, and Egwene starts to channel. When she threw a little puff of a fireball, I was like, yes, I'm so glad he didn't just catch on fire. That would have been annoying. And demonstrated her 200 IQ at snapping Perrin's bonds. Now Perrin, these angles that they use to make him terrifying, to make him seem super large, they needed at least these angles, maybe not the terrifying aspect for Loyal, to make him seem bigger than life. But I love the camera work in the scene. His eyes, the glow, and you think Perrin's gonna rip this man's head off before Egwene ends up stabbing him in the shoulder neck trap area. You know, this one. He stabs him there. So I don't think he's dead. At least I hope he's not dead. It'd be kind of weird if they killed him. Now this is a bit surprising, as Eomond is supposed to be a swords master. Now this isn't a huge spoiler in anything, but he's supposed to be really fucking good with a sword. And his first instinct would not just be, my god, that boy's a knock friend. Nah, he would whip out his sword and attempt to probably murder Perrin. Most likely murder Perrin. So that's a little nitpick, but overall this scene, banger! As they flee, Egwene snags the dead Aes Sedai rings, and it's just another hint to the pride that she has and will continue to have throughout the series. I can't say it enough. I love the little touches. And that's when they discover wolves are just fucking up the camp. And they leave, and Egwene is like, yo, is that wolf gonna hurt his parents? Like, nah. That's my boy. And this makes me hopeful that they're gonna introduce the character that they did not have earlier, because I really like the way he plays off of Perrin especially and helps him develop. So that is my hope. Now Liandrin's Nynaeve scheme comes to fruition with Moiraine, but it doesn't bear the fruit she exactly wants. Moiraine is not going to be fooled. She tries to convince her that Nynaeve might choose the red. She has this force of will, of which she does, but she also cares more about healing people than anything else, and so they talk about how the Yellow Sisters will probably want her. And I like how there are plots within here that not all of them succeed. You can see that Liandrin's just tossing out things to see what hits the wall and sticks. It doesn't exactly have to be the be-all end-all, and not everything will work out. I like the scheming. If you can't tell, I'm a huge fan of Game of Thrones, despite the terrible ending. It is my favorite show of all time, and I love scheming within my shows. I love characters being smart and having contingency plans for everything. Shout out Littlefinger. Steppen is found by Lan to be praying, and we get our first mention of the Forsaken. Now this is an area where the showrunners can really change things up and make these guys awesome. But just keep in mind, the concept for these guys can make some of the best scenes in all of television. Just like the Liandrin scheming scene, but between friends, Alanna and Moiraine talk about the finesse of the politics in the White Tower. Add depth to the story. Make it as multi-layered as possible. Complexity is a good thing. It makes shows last and age well. But Moiraine, come on. I know you don't live here very often, but take your boots off. Your friend did it in your room. Have some self-respect. But there is also this weird wall contraption with a painting of a girl. There are magical objects in this universe, so I'm curious to see what the hell this one does. Lan offers to stay with Steppen for the night, and they're just hanging out, and they're talking about him bonding with Alanna. And he's like, yeah, you know what? I've never done it with one dude. Or two dudes. But after joking around, they talk about Nynaeve, and Lan is fearing falling for Nynaeve. Now, they haven't really gone into his backstory too much, but Lan is a tragic character, and he is scared of developing these connections. And even though Steppen sees it, and Lan can see it himself, and he sees Nynaeve liking him, he does not want this to happen. He wants to distance himself. He has had a tragic backstory and believes he will also have a tragic end. So he is conflicted in his feelings over Nynaeve being somebody that he actually likes. Lan the Chad has pulled women his whole life, but he has not necessarily gotten the connection to them that he's getting to Nynaeve, and it's worrying him. The tea that Steppen gives Lan ends up having this sleep drug from Nynaeve, and Steppen is found having committed suicide in front of the Warder statues that Nynaeve and Liandrin discuss, about how these men gave their lives, tens of thousands of them, over eons to protect the women. And now that Steppen failed, he has killed himself because he did not manage to protect his Aes Sedai. And both the symbolism and the moment of Lan, he was drugged. There's nothing he can do, but the pain he feels at not saving his friend, it was palpable within the air as he just stands there, not crying out or anything, just looking at his friend with a knife in his gut. Oof. They are doing emotional resonance right. Now, the second scene to get me teary in the eye was the ceremony for Step-In. Now, I do have my problems with the way Lan acts, but I think it is warranted here. I think the scene would have worked better farther on in the series, where we could see more Chad Lan, more stoic Lan, going through these insane situations with a calm face. I think it would have even hit harder then, but even in this moment, as they do the ceremony and pound their chest, and Lan lets out his emotions, lets it rip, and sees Moraine crying because they share the bond. It hit me hard, even though Step-In's not even a book character. I don't have any relation past these episodes with him. The way I would have liked it, if it has to happen in this episode, would be for Lan to just sit there silent shaking as he does first, and Moraine to break down weeping as they share this bond, and it just shows how tough Lan is, as Moraine, through these diluted emotions of the bond, feels his pain as Lan just sits there in anger and sorrow at him failing his friend. It would have been so impactful. It already was impactful, and this is just a preference of mine of them not establishing Lan as hardened as he is. This scene is still great, and I don't have a problem with it at all. It brought a well of emotion in me and made me teary in the eye. I thought it was great. It was just a little characterization of Lan, but overall, not a big deal at all. This episode was by far my favorite episode so far. The emotional moments, the politics, these are some of my favorite things to add intricacy to your story. I love big action scenes, but only when they mean something after a significant amount of buildup. I think you can tell I really like Game of Thrones for a reason. But this episode gets a 9 out of 10 for me. I've been kind of harsh with my ratings because I'm trying to keep it away from the fan perspective. View it as somebody who has knowledge, but also somebody who hasn't seen the show at the same time. But this episode hit perfect. The flaws were so minimal that you can only call them nitpicks or creative choices. Now, later down the road, we can see if this episode will go down in rating because of the choices they made. But in this moment in time, 9 out of 10. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Like and subscribe. See you guys later.